So 3 weeks ago, when Macron decided this new dissolution and the new elections, we decided to a short OAT. We were close to 50 in the 50 area. Then you know that we touched 86 as a maximum level, and now we are close to 60. What we believe that we will stay in a range between 60 and 90. That's a new range where we believe that the spread between 080 and good will continue. But clearly, it will depend on the next decisions. It will depend on who Macron can decide as a new prime minister, what will be the next finance minister of finance, and if we see positive signal, we can stay in this 60 bips area. But obviously, if the Front Populaire, for example, will decide to implement the measures defined by the program, we have a risk to break this new high. So we are monitoring the spread very carefully, but today there is no significant spread or widening, but we believe that we will stay in the range reading between 60 and 80 bips, 90 bips.
Nicolas, today we are not seeing that widening in the spread. However, though, when you think about the fact that there's new EU fiscal rules and the fact that the fiscal position of France is actually so limited, is that the next big event when you think about the trajectory of global debt? The fact that there might be now a new clash with Brussels, even though we didn't see an absolute majority for the far left or the far right?
Yeah, that's a very good point, because you know that if we estimate the impact of the Nouveau Front Populaire program is huge on the public finance. And as you know, the current deficit is very high in France, close to 5.5. So it's not possible to further increase the deficit. We have to maintain the 5.5%. And that's the reason why it's a balancing act for this new government to potentially decide new measures, but to maintain this level of deficit. But there is a way. It's not impossible. We can imagine, for example, to have a deal between reforming the pension and cancelling the pension reform and potentially increasing tax. So that's possible to partially implement some measures from the left party without dramatically change the deficit. But that's something clearly that we are monitoring, because you know that the debt dynamic has been very bad for France over the last years. And if we implemented the program of the Nouveau Populaire, potentially the debt to GDP ratio can go above 120%, which could be a big problem, of course, for the French debt.
Now, as a market player, I would like to get your thoughts on whether these new fiscal rules are actually efficient in putting pressure on the countries. Because for the longest time, the EU was actually criticized for not implementing the fiscal rules to their max, not implementing fines to the countries that have disobeyed the rules. Now that the European Commission has actually said that it sees this likelihood that France will need an excessive deficit procedure, are you expecting that at one point Brussels could actually impose fines on France, or do you think that that would just be too politically sensitive and therefore not a point of pressure for market players like yourself?
Well, I think the situation is not comparable to the previous or to 2012 during the debt crisis, when the European Commission and IMF decided to put pressure on Greece, for example. France, this is not the same situation. And I think that the political pressure, of course, we can have some political pressure, but that's not exactly the same situation. But what is important is more about the market reaction. If we stay at this level, I think there is no big issue. The main issue is if we see further spread widening, and if we go, for example, above 100 bips. In this case, France and the French authorities can potentially ask an ECB intervention. And here we have a problem, because we cannot imagine that the ECB can decide to implement a specific program like the TPI without a clear roadmap regarding the deficit and regarding debt sustainability. Because as you know, for example, regarding the TPI, the program decided by Christine Lagarde, it seems very unlikely to implement the TPI when you are in this excessive deficit procedure. Or you just need to come with a clear debt reduction program. So I think the pressure cannot come really from the European Commission, but more from the market, and a potential discussion between than the government and the ECB. But we are not in this situation today. And what we can believe is President Macron will be very cautious and will clearly monitor this evolution. And we can imagine that he will avoid this situation for France.